Hello, Jeff. It's so exciting to see you, and I'm really excited that Andy Haynes is has given me the opportunity to have an Annie Antics column in the magazine, so I can still interview authors, but in a different way. And I appreciate you saying yes to being one of these authors because I'm looking for writing about authors that have that extra. I call it like they have extravaganza, right? They have extravaganza, in them.
Vaganza ought to be a word. Vaganza ought
Pardon
to be, Vaganza itself ought to be a word. There's
It
Vaganza
is.
and there's
It's funny.
extravaganza.
It's funny. It's one of my favorite words. And
Uh-huh.
in one of my prompts that's in the book, we had to write our favorite words, and then we had to slightly change what they meant. So I
Mhm.
changed it to extravaganza because, like, I live life with extravaganza. I think it's very cool. Um,
Well, when you
Now,
travel, you should always bring extravaganza with you when you
yes,
travel.
yes, yes.
You know, but it can
So
change. And the word you give something can change the experience. So it could
that's
be it
true.
could be
It really. I did not know that you lived in Virginia.
for gosh between 82 and 92. Yeah,
I used to live in Virginia too.
really. Where were
I
you?
lived in Virginia Beach, Hampton, and Richmond.
Well, two of those are on the ocean. I lived in Arlington and
Oh wow!
in a town called Clifton in Fairfax counties where I wrote Sleepless and like five. I wrote Jesus 7 or 8 movies in this little office 6 days a week until it was time to move out here. And I wrote my way back out west. I didn't want to be back there, but
Right,
it was a really cute town. It was like 200 people in the whole town. It was all the whole every building was on the historic register. You couldn't change a window pane without um, this was some of the windows had original glass in them. From
right.
half a century ago.
That's amazing. My mother had a B&B. They just sold it in Illinois. They
Uh,
had it for years, decades, and they finally decided to retire. But it was a historical building as well, and she wanted to just change the name, and it took forever. But they did allow her to. But they had to say formally the Berkeley House. But
uh,
there's a stained glass window in the third floor room. It is amazing. Like it's like they said we fell in love with that stained glass window and we knew we had to live here. But the reason I'm telling you about this is you're talking about the buildings, and I know how important these buildings are because
yeah,
they were important to that town in Illinois. But the man that wrote Two and a Half Men
yeah.
would always stay in the carriage house, which is above where my mom and Ernie lived. And he'd come there to write every single year. And I'm there, and she says, "Do you want to meet the guy that writes Two and a Half Men?" I'm like, "No, I don't watch that show." And then I came home and I started watching it, and I was like, "Why didn't I meet that guy?" But anyway, she loved having him there. He was a really nice guy, supposedly. But it sounds like what you did, like how you wrote a bunch of screenplays,
I
right?
What happened is I lived out in LA in my early 20s.
Okay.
When I got married, um, my wife was going for her CPA in DC. Already with DC, it's CPA, DC, all these initials. But the requirements they had back there, where you had to work 2 years at a public company, and in California,
Oh,
you had to work 4 years at a public company. She already had 1 year under her belt, so I said, okay, I'll move back for a year, and then we'll come out here again. I can take a break for a year, but that year turned into like 12, and life had we saw a house, and then we had kids, and but when the script for Sleepless sold, I started getting work and having meetings, and I was starting to fly out. Even when I lived in Virginia, I came out about once every 2 or 3 months. But now, I still felt like I lived in California, but I just had a bedroom very far away. And
right.
uh, but then I started coming out like 2 and 3 times a month, and I had tiny children, and I couldn't. My son would always say, "You coming home?" And I couldn't promise him that I was gonna come home, and it just drove me crazy. I hated leaving them, and when I got to California, I hated leaving California. So I figured I got to find a way to put these together. And thank God, my career at the point justified because those two kids were also four people's grandchildren, and they didn't want me going 3,000 miles away, and some of that is still being felt. But now, but I got it reversed now. My daughter went to college back east, and shit, 2003, and she hasn't moved back, and now she's got my granddaughter back there. So
Oh,
so I have a 7.5 year old granddaughter that I only get to see like twice a year.
that's,
And
I mean, that's beautiful though to have a granddaughter. I hear that that is like the best thing ever.
the funny thing is, Annie, and I'll put this out to the audience: anybody that I ever knew or thought of or heard or read about ever said that when they wanted to grow up, they want to be a grandparent. But everybody who is a grandparent says the best thing I ever
This,
did.
yes,
It's
absolutely.
it's like two things I became that I never thought. Like when you're a kid, no one says I want to grow up to be a stepfather.
Right, right, right,
And
right,
I
right.
did that, and no one says I want to grow up to be a grandfather, and I did that, and I'm still. When you say the word grandfather, and then you apply it to yourself, it just
Yeah, right. It doesn't seem to
doesn't
fit.
add up. It doesn't. I
It's
still, I
you.
feel 16 still.
Well,
So
yeah, you're young at heart, big time, and in the soul. You know, um, I I always wanted to be mom, and obviously I wasn't. But so like a lot of my friends were like, "Do you want to be the godmother to my kid?" So I am godmother central, But and my nieces and nephews adore me, you know.
they do.
FYI, off subject for a second. Remember I told you about Adam wanting to go to film school. He's at Temple studying film and ancient Greece literature.
Tell him this: that the whole entire trajectory of my life pivoted on being bold enough to call one of my heroes out in Hollywood when I was
I'm
21.
gonna tell him that because I'm gonna tell you. I want I wanted him to talk to someone that had done what he wants to do. Or
Mhm.
at least been around somebody who's doing exactly what he wants to do.
Just tell him. I mean, I was a cameraman at the time, and
Oh,
my hero cameraman was Conrad Hall, who shot
I
Cool Hand
read that.
and Butch Cassidy. And one night,
Butch Cassidy.
September of 1976, I just said I was in Boston and I was out of school and making movies, as a business. Um, and I said, you know what? Back then there was a phone book and you could look people up.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
You could dial 411, and
Right, and ask for somebody's number.
so I figured if he's going to be in the phone book, I'm going to consider that meeting me halfway. And I called him and I left a message and he called me back. And he said, yeah, I told him what I was going on, film school, and I'm, making movies, but I want to, make features. And he said, if you're ever out here, stop by. So 2 months later, I flew out there and we started a friendship. And that, so, I probably saw him half a dozen or so times, and and I showed him some of my work, and he spanked me. And then I went and created something really good. And then when he saw that, he said, I was 22. And he said, you absolutely have it. If you want to get into AFI, if you want to get into the union, and I'll help you. And he said, but here's the thing, you're going to hate it. He said, I can tell right now from knowing you, you're not going to want to spend 15 years working your way up to where you already are. And he said, if you can write, he didn't know anything. He said, if you can write,
Oh, right.
he said, this is the era of the screenwriter.
That's
And
very cool.
the studio system had broken down and spec scripts were happening. So I thought, okay, there's my career path. I'll just write a spec script. And, instead of the 15 years it would have taken me to be a cameraman, it took 17 years to get a spec script sold. But I didn't know that, every year just folded into the next, trying. But it was, Adam, it was because I stepped out of that and said, I'm
Well,
going to,
he'll watch this. He watches the
okay,
things. So,
Adam,
Adam,
call.
call Jeff. You'll like him a
You
lot.
have the
I
guts to
told
go
him.
to Vienna for a month, not knowing anybody. Then you have the
All
guts.
by himself. I was like, "What?" I said, "Adam, you're crazy." I love that. I love that kid. Um, you wrote a movie called Iron Will.
I did a production. Yeah, I didn't originate that, but about 85 to 90% of what's in that movie is mine.
Interesting. Um, because one of my doctors, after they did it, that's one of my stories in my book, is called Iron Will and Strong Constitution.
Oh wow.
Because I did some funky ICU test, and the it goes -3 to 3, and mine was 18. How much stress is on your body?
Uh-huh.
Physical stress. And it was 18. So
Whoa.
he said, "Okay, look, you should not be here." He's like, "You have a strong will and an iron will and strong constitution."
It's a
So
great.
I wrote an essay about that.
I know your book is coming out, but a great title would be "You Should Not Be Here."
That's true. I shouldn't. But it's love, I'll tell you that. I know it's love. I love the name of my book though. Now I didn't know also that you were involved in musicals. The musical for Sleepless in
Yeah,
Seattle.
that was a very long process. From now, just you do the numbers. I think my partner got the rights out of Sony in 2007, and in 2013, uh, we had a 6-week run at the Pasadena Playhouse out in LA in Pasadena. And the idea for that was to get picked up for Broadway or picked up for London. And it did get picked up for London eventually. But in the meantime, the whole thing just dissolved into lawsuits and acrimony. And so, as far as I know, it's dead. And
That's what happened with the Great Comet.
but the process of turning that story, not that script, but the process of turning that story into a musical was
Was
incredible.
that was cool, right?
Yeah, there's so many layers. I mean, we had trouble with the composing team, so I think I went through 6 or 7 different composing teams, but the one that we did in Pasadena was the third team. And um, and this was before and we were in 3 different parts of the country. So we wrote this thing. I wrote this thing with the composers. I had met them for 7 months. We wrote on, having Zoom meetings. I wasn't even Zoom then. It was like FaceTime or something.
Right.
Skype, I guess, for 7 months, and put the show together. And as a writer, I thought the discipline of screenwriting was tough. But
Oh, I can't imagine.
you get like 1/3 of a page, and then you get a page, and then another song has to come in, and so I had to crunch everything down and tell this story. I think the book, the script for the show was probably only
10 pages.
I think maybe 45, 40 some pages, but all the songs, you had to put
Right,
the
right.
It was a fully fleshed thing, but if you only did the pages, the script pages, it wasn't a lot. But I had to tell the whole story, and that whole story, phone call and Valentine and this and that. Uh, and in terms of collaborating, I still don't collaborate with other writers, but collaborating with composer and lyricist was a really interesting process. And giving up that real estate on the page was just excruciating. But
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
So it's not something. I also wrote, for the band Chicago. I was hired to write a musical for them, and that got stopped halfway through when the producer, unfortunately, the producer got one of those cases of pancreatic cancer where you get a phone call and 6 weeks you're gone.
Oh,
So
that's so sad.
the project died with him because he was the only guy the band trusted. But
Oh.
I have half of a musical based on the band Chicago's catalog, and it wasn't a jukebox musical. What I tried to do was I tried to make it so that if you never heard their music before, you thought the songs were written for the show, not the other way around. Well, this would have been so great. This would have come out in 2007 or 8, and it would be everywhere now.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yep.
And I don't sit there and grieve over money I didn't make, but what I do grieve over, in both the case of Sleepless musical and the Chicago musical, is that audiences didn't get to see it. I'm comfortable, and I mean, who wouldn't want 20 or 30 million more dollars, but I'm comfortable where and but just to go past high schools and see it on the thing, and to know what kind of feelings that the show is going to generate, and I had a part in that, a founding part in that. That's the kind of that's where I get the pride and the fulfillment from. First the artistic challenge. There's the artistic challenge. There's the craft challenge. There's the diplomacy challenge, which is goddamn unbelievable, because there's so many hands in the pie. And
Ooh, yeah.
Yet in both cases, I was the guardian of the story. And if the story fell apart, there was nothing. So in Sleepless, and in both cases, I was the guardian of the brand. And I took both brands very, very seriously. And but still, you got to be diplomatic. You got to, and a lot of us writers are, super introverted
Super
and
what?
introverted, and not great in not great in group situations. We just want to go home and all that stuff. So I had all that going on, and in fact, after the Pasadena run in 2013, for 7 months we worked on it, in our own homes. But then it was 5 months of rehearsals and performances. So for 5 months for 5 months I drove from Malibu to Pasadena and back every day. It's only 38 miles, and there were times it took me 2 or 3 hours each way. And so that plus spending the day spending every day with 150 or 200 people, when I'm seriously a hermit and an introvert. I could have just gone to stayed overnight in Pasadena, but I had this place in Malibu, and just to walk in that door at night, I get home.
So good.
I get home at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, have to leave again at 9 in the morning, but it was all worth it. And then, 4 or 5 hours in a car. I think over that 5 months, if you added it all up, I spent 21 days in a car.
Ooh.
I was spent screaming at people, what are you trying to? So, but anyway, what happened there is, the summer of 2013, because of just the pressure of the show and things were going on domestically, I was absorbing stepkids and everything and helping raise them through some difficult times, and just the physical fatigue. So I had a gigantic crash at the end of in the summer of 2013. And
did you?
And what is this now? 10 years later, I'm still coming back from that, because the physical exhaustion and the fatigue brought with it a bunch of depression, all kinds of soul pain. And
but I like that you admit that,
because
I think it's important to admit this kind of stuff.
Well,
it helps people.
When you hear that some performer had nervous exhaustion or fatigue and they had to pull off of a tour, that's what happens. And the thing is, something like depression, which I guess I've had all my adult life, but when you get that tired, it's like all the guards have left the castle and they leave the door open and all the invaders can come in, and then you got to get them out one by one using your bare hands. And so with medication and therapy and qigong and getting these puppies
and tai chi and sage and we cleanse
I got my crystals too. Annie, we're two of a kind.
We really are. We really are. We'd be great friends if we lived near each other. But especially walking on the beach with the dogs.
Yeah, I'm not coming there, so you have to come here. I'm not.
Oh, I don't really get to travel. It's really hard. I went to my friends for 2 nights, and my husband's like, "How much stuff are you bringing?" I'm like, "Tom, I'm handicapped. Like, I need things that you can't even imagine."
25 years ago, you'd have done the same thing. You would. I bet you.
But it would have been filled with high heels,
right.
Really nice stuff. But this time, it had a walker.
Yeah, I know. But I bet you're a classic overpacker anyway.
I am. Plus, I put books in there to give to my friends and stuff, so to pass them on. Except for ones that I keep, like yours and Owen's. Yeah. I don't get rid of everyone's books. Now I want to move on to the Proust questions.
Okay.
Who was your favorite interview? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That's not a question. That's not a question. I just thought that was funny while I was pulling this up. What is your idea of perfect happiness? And I
You just,
ask you this because you're very ethereal about things.
I just thought of Fast Times at Ridgemont High. What did Sean Penn say?
I thought you were gonna say Weekend at Bernie's.
Tasty, tasty bud and great waves, bitchin' waves, tasty, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, perfect happiness is being happy where you are when you are, just being okay with it. Happiness and joy are different things. Happiness is a more baseline state, and joy is kind of like peaks from that. But a happy person can have shitty things happen, but they're gonna approach it like a happy person.
Well, you can tell that everything you do is with joy. I mean, come on, you find joy in like looking at the top of water moving, you know?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I understand that that is a beautiful thing, but you capture it in such a way that it really is joyful. And I mean, even your dogs. It's like, yo, look, they're sitting like yin and yang. I mean, your dogs are like, let's do this for dad. You know?
I I get it
It's so
totally.
funny one's black and one's white.
That wasn't planned, but that's what happened.
Oh, that wasn't planned?
People assume we got them together, and so
But
just
yeah, I mean, it's easy to assume that.
just for statistical sake, 87% of the people say salt and pepper. Then about 12% say ebony and ivory, and about 5% say yin and yang. And
Yin and yang is what I think. But yeah,
well,
you're right.
especially when they form that ball, when they sleep in a circle like that.
Oh, that's so cute.
This is just
I
what
mean,
people want to talk. They hear me talk about my dogs, but uh,
well,
what you
we
said,
love your photography.
what you said about joy, I didn't really consider it that way. But those, and thank you, like really, because there are people in my life that just taken it upon themselves to point out to me, dude, where's your joy? And
What?
when
I
I'm
mean, you'll even say, like, I didn't feel good from last night's dinner, but I decided to get up early and take a walk on the beach. Like, you found joy even after, like, a miserable night.
well, I'll
I
tell you
stalk you.
what you gave me though, Annie. That the gift you just gave me is that realizing that those little moments. I guess I wasn't calling them joy, but they're moments of deep connection. When I finally I send these pictures of the ocean and the shutters in this room and the way the light comes through, and it's this incredible sense of connection. And in the beginning, I was getting comments like people thought, you're jamming it in our faces that, you have this great life, or it's, and we're in Buffalo where it's 8 feet of snow, and, you're saying, screw you. And I'm saying, no, how can you not want to share this? And look at these colors. But yeah, I mean, those are moments of joyful connection that I was not putting the word joy to it. So thank you.
You're welcome. They really are. What I picture from your photography, because I'm always like thinking, uh, what a cool book picture, like table coffee
Oh
table
yeah.
book that would be with a poem,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
a line on every page.
I'm getting hounded by people that want me to do that. And there's when I get over this next stage of whatever's going on and just kick off that essential laziness that keeps me from doing it, and just say, sit down and do this, and then I'll do it.
Yes. I mean, the way you capture the light through the shutters, or even the shadow through the shutters, it's like and it's all very visceral when you watch. Look, see, I'm saying watch
Uh,
instead of look, because everything's telling a story.
well, just when we on the topic of laziness, um, all I do right. I'm basically just holding up. I wake up and I hold up the phone and I go like that, and it's cropping and stuff, but it's just there. I'm not going out and setting up a
Looking for things, right.
it's just there. So 90% of the pictures I take are either in this
accidental.
in this room or within 100 yards of here on the beach, maybe not even that.
That's really cool, and it shows how much the ocean changes the landscape.
Every second,
Yep.
I get more respect for this ocean, and especially during these storms we've had. What a personality this ocean has.
Which living person do you most admire?
Keith Richard. I, I don't know.
Keith Richard?
If you read his book,
I don't mean to be mean. It's just like I didn't expect you to say Keith Richard.
I didn't either. If you read his, I'm looking at Nelson Mandela. I'm not going to be that person. If you read Keith's book or Springsteen, if you read their books, their autobiographies that they wrote, they wrote these. They weren't ghostwritten.
Right.
And Keith's dedication to music and to the purity of music. That book was not written by a celebrity or a rock star. It was written by a musician, and I really respect it. And he's been showing up every year. And Springsteen just, yeah. So I can't, definitely not a politician, for God's sake. And movie stars, I don't know. I guess there'd be people that nobody knows that completely unknown regular people that I know that I might say that. Somebody I admire the most. That's the question, right? Who I admire the most?
Yes.
One of the people I admire most is the guy I wrote the book about in Attachments. Was the character of Henry Griffin was based on a real person, and it's funny to use the word admire because for me, the sexiest thing in the world is admiration. I just can't be around people if I don't admire them. That's how I pick friends and heroes and everything. If I stop admiring a person I'm with, I can't be with them anymore. What I admire, though, is qualities. Not necessarily. I mean, talent is a quality, but it's not achievement. Of course, it's their talent and it's their personality that got them to achieve and keep achieving, and the gift. I mean, Springsteen's been touring since 1970, and what I learned from watching him is that he won't rest until you've been completely entertained.
Right.
And it's all about the audience. It's not about, we're here to do our thing and we're going to collect the money and go to the next town. It is all about, I will not rest until all 80,000 of you have had the best night of your life. And as a way of living, as a way of being in the world, that he could be anything and do anything. He could be the biggest asshole in the world and people still go to his shows. McCartney, Springsteen, and Keith Richards, I'd say, because of their dedication to who they are and their dedication to their craft and their dedication to the audience. It's not about being dedicated to themselves. And I had to make that switch in my 20s. I was in my 20s, I was young and I'm trying to write movies and plays and everything. And I thought it was, so the whole point of it was to get people to think I'm fascinating and write stories and articles and interviews.
Right.
And get on the cover of this and the cover of that. And that's what I thought it was about. And then, this was a gigantic moment. I switched that into, this is the question I asked before I wrote Sleepless. And it was, instead of how do I get on magazine covers so people think I'm famous and cool, it was literally this: how do I get two people to walk out of a movie theater in Finland holding hands? And
that's so sweet.
That challenge drove me, because then I realized it's not about me. It's about them. If I can get, and somehow I picked Finland, and coincidentally, the second place I was ever invited to speak was Helsinki, Finland.
Really?
And out of all those countries, I don't know why I picked Finland for that sentence, but I just knew if that would have meant going backwards from that moment, that it was already all over the world.
Right.
And I wanted to, I've said this in 1,000 interviews, but it's never not true. I wanted to send a Valentine to the whole planet. And but in a weird way, then I got the interviews and then I got the covers and then I got the, but it was in the right order. And again, it wasn't about me. But in your 20s, what are you going to do? You're not going to be that evolved. You hear the phrase, we all grew up hearing the phrase rich and famous. Like that's the thing to be. And there's lots of ways to do that, but the three people that I just told you about, their way of doing it was to give to the audience.
Right.
The essence of everything, and that's the essence of all good writing, is that you're not you're telling everybody a story about themselves, whether it's A Man Called Otto, or whether it's Wakanda, or whether it's Top Gun, or whatever it is. If they don't see themselves in that,
Right.
if it doesn't connect with them, it's just they're gonna find some other distraction.
Correct.
And this world right now is so filled with distractions, and we all have that little, we're not all narcissists, we all have that little seed in us that it is about us, and we're survival mechanisms. And so we are always going to think of ourselves first, even the ones who are, people pleasers to a fault. They're still doing it for themselves.
What is a quality that you most like in a man and a woman, or just one or the other? Like a quality that you find the most endearing about somebody?
Kindness.
Which talents would you like most to have?
Talent.
I'm gonna guess. I mean, I don't. Can I take a guess? What you might say?
Sure.
Something with music.
You're right. The one thing I've never done is play in a band.
Right. I think
And
you'd be good at that.
I was a lighting guy, and so in a way I was playing an instrument. I was playing a lighting
Right.
board.
Right.
I did all my shows live. I didn't program anything.
And that is very like beat and
Oh my God, my shows were great. I'm
right.
not doing it, but I'm not in the room or on the stage with the guys so what I do now is I played guitar for over 50 years, and I never got better than I was after 6 months. And about a year or so ago, I got a bass guitar. Some voice said, get a bass. And I took
It's
to that.
different.
Oh my God, yeah. I took to it immediately. And so I can play along with these, blues tracks, or, slow blues and slow jazz tracks. And there are moments where everybody gets to the same spot at the same time. And it's incredible to be in the room. I mean, it's incredible to be there. It's all on coming through the TV and everything. But I can only imagine that person's 6 feet away, and that look. So now that all the groups I ever saw in concert, now that they're on YouTube, and you can, when I saw
See
them,
anything. Yeah.
they were this big and they were a mile away in the arena, but you see the icon. When I watch concerts now, I'm looking at the eye contact between the band members. And so
Yeah, I love when they get all into each other and stuff.
trading off jam, just that moment where they connect. There's that in that Beatles documentary, the best moments where John and Paul would look at each other just like, and you
they know what to do.
saw it go all the way back to when they were 15. And you knew that all through the years that look happened. And that look was the drug. That look was the center of that look, created everything we're still singing today. And so yeah, you're right. Music. I would have loved to have been a musician, and I never. When I did get the bass, I started taking some theory stuff on YouTube, but I learned just enough theory to get in ankle deep, and figure out, okay, and just the mathematical beauty. I mean, I can't do math at all, but the mathematical beauty of music is incredible. So you're right. Yeah, music.
Let me ask you this. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
I think my greatest achievement is that uh, my relationship with my kids, especially my son,
Oh, I
that
love that.
is able to guide him through life, and he'll call me 3 times a day. And for all you guys with sons out there, I have one that actually calls me and asks for advice, and then actually takes it sometimes. And my obviously my daughter came first, but for some reason, when I had a son, the way things were going on at the time, there was nothing more important than getting that right. And then the second, aside from my son and daughter, I have 4 stepkids, but my stepdaughter was in 7th grade when I met her mom, and I think she would have fallen through every crack in the boardwalk. But the relationship I have with her now, and I think she probably is my best achievement, even more than my son, because there's no blood bond, and her father's not alive now, but he was alive, when I met her, and she already had a mom and a stepmom and a dad, and didn't really need, nobody asked for a step parent to come into their life, and so, but what we have now, uh, I really do think that my greatest achievement was her.
That's beautiful. What is your most treasured possession? There's two more questions. Just this and one other question.
From all lifetime in therapy, I'm just always going to go with the first answer. Uh, Starting in 1990, what the hell is that? Starting in 1990, I started keeping a journal every day, January 1st, 1990, and I kept it for 10 years. And in those journals, uh, 2 weeks into that first first journal, I got the idea for Sleepless in Seattle and wrote it down. So the strains that go through that book, I had a 4.5-year-old, a 6-month-old, a wife. I was teaching high school English. I was teaching Taekwondo. I owned a business, and the threads that go through those 10 years. So, from getting from being absolutely nowhere, and then getting this idea, and then one day, oh, Tom Hanks and Ron Howard, and then it would be, and I had this, and then my daughter did this. So everybody's growing up in that book, and when I started slowing down in the very end of the 99, 2000. I started slowing down because my marriage started falling apart, and I didn't want. I mean, there was I had couple of rules about it, thinking that somebody might read it one day.
Right, right.
One was that I wasn't going to say anything bad about anybody, and that's the one that matters here, because I serious marital problems, and I would just come into the office, after just fighting and fighting, and then not be able to say, there's nowhere you'll see anything bad about her. It's just, I got to figure out how to deal with I got to figure out what to do next time this happens. And so it was all about this remarkable explosion of growth, and all these, in my spiritual development, my physical development, my family development, and my career. And those books are sitting in because
And
I'm in California.
mental.
They're in one of those metal suitcases at my daughter's house, in New England. I'm not going to go any further than that, because
Yeah, because I might go find it.
because I don't want them out here because of earthquakes and floods and fires. So nothing's likely to happen where they are.
That's
But
really neat.
what I told her is that if you ever have to evacuate, take this suitcase, because our family history's in there. And so
That was like your Facebook.
it was like,
Gave you
but,
memories.
but there's exactly. But some stuff in there is so painful and raw, I can't look at it.
Well, I
And
can imagine from your book Attachments.
but I do remember the first day on the set in Seattle, and I'm in the production office and I'm writing. I'm like, Meg Ryan just walked by, and uh, but but the thing is, when I started that journal, I was as far from Meg Ryan and as far from any of this as anybody could be, and it was all just a dream. But
Okay, ready?
yeah, quick
What
fire.
is what is your favorite let's I should time it. We should do it for a minute. Let's do it and just see what happens.
Okay, but I'm not going to be bound by any of these answers. They're just first thing that comes
Yeah,
up.
but you can say pass.
Okay.
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 Ah. Who are your heroes in real life?
Anybody who steps out of themselves to take care of someone else who's in need.
That's really nice. Who is your favorite hero of fiction?
Originally, my first thing that came to me was Holden Caulfield, but I don't know that I'd say that if I put any thought into it. But let's just keep going. Holden Caulfield.
Okay. Oh, this is gonna be tough. Who are your favorite writers?
John Steinbeck. Just keep going. Steinbeck.
Oh wow. What do you regard as the lowest depth of misery?
Not having a purpose.
What do you most value in your friends?
Their friendship.
There you go. That was it. But I want to ask you one other question, because I this is one a very important thing to me. What is your most marked characteristic?
Um, I care about people. I know it sounds. I think if you ask my friends what it is, they'll think he really cares about us.
People really, really look up to you, so, and to find you're a very humble man,
It's a
because
hard let in. It's a hard thing to let in. I think there's a lifelong protection against if I start believing this, I'm gonna turn into an asshole. And there was nothing more important to me. I'll tell you this. Not where the question part's over. I can tell you a really quick story. There's a bench in the Boston Common in Boston in the public garden. It's right across the street from the bar that became the Cheers bar. Before it was a Cheers bar, that was just a bar that was on, in between two parts of our campus at Emerson College. I
okay,
was 19, and I had this little puppy, and I'm sitting on a bench in that park. And I made a promise to myself that everything I've done here, I'm going to do. Everything I was going to do, everything I was going to achieve. I'm going to win a goddamn Oscar for a movie. I'm going to have hit movies and blah blah blah, all that. I know it's going to be as a writer yet. I don't know. Just I'm going
but
to
you
be
need to be involved in one, right?
in movies, and it's going to go all the way to the gold statue. And but then I said, but I'm not going to be an asshole. I got to do this without being an asshole. And so that was 19. What is the math? 11 years later, I'm 30, and have a play off Broadway, and the play didn't work. And and it was a terrible experience. It was a terrible experience, but it was a great experience because what I got out of it as a writer was like I could see exactly where I was. What we're doing is we're pressing jukebox buttons to get emotions out of an audience. So I could see where it was working because I went to every single preview and every performance, and I could see, okay, that works, that doesn't work. And also just the challenge of writing. And I'd have to rewrite scenes, and I'm 6 o'clock at night before the curtain, before they let the audience in. I'm dictating lines and working with the actors. And so I met every challenge. And I learned as a writer, I learned a lesson that obviously you wouldn't have ever heard of me if I didn't learn this lesson. And that was, you got to have an ending. You have to have an ending. You can't just resolve the story. You have to have an ending. And so the next thing I thought of, the first thing I thought of was, okay, how does this end? On top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day at sunset. I went, that's an ending. And so
Oh God.
I wrote that whole movie knowing you have 120 pages to get to this ending. Now you have 90 pages. Now you have 70 pages. Now you have 30, but you have got to get to that ending. So I learned that, but I also learned that I was turning into an asshole. And I didn't. So when the thing fell apart, we didn't run the rest of the summer. We didn't continue on anywhere. That's when Karate Kid had come out a year before, and I loved this idea of a Mr. Miyagi, and I went and found one. And I went and studied. That's when I studied my martial arts training because is the character that had to get built. And so that related directly to that 19-year-old said, you're not going to be an asshole. And there's probably a lot of people today that would, by their standards, yes, I am. But we can only go by our own standards. By my own standards, I'm not taking shortcuts with people. I'm not being unkind. Because that guy answered, because Conrad Hall answered the phone in 1976, I answer the phone. If someone has needs a mentor or needs some advice, this, I'm constantly there.
Like,
Because he was kind to me.
that's so.
A famous person with Academy Awards on his shelf was kind to a complete stranger from film school. He could have easily said, good luck, see you in the movies. But he didn't. And here's to wrap that story up. And I've said this before, to wrap that story up, Conrad Hall and I hadn't seen him for years. Went off and had my career, went back east and everything. I was kind of embarrassed to call him up again because I hadn't done anything. Sleepless comes out. There's a production still of Conrad Hall and Sven Nykvist, who shot Sleepless, and Vilmos Zsigmond, the three most famous and best cameramen we had, all on the set in New York. They were all visiting Sven. So I have that picture. Even better, Conrad Hall got nominated the same year I did. And I went up to him at the Oscar nominees luncheon, which is the best moment you can ever have in your life. And I said, listen, I don't know if you remember this, but 17 years ago, this kid from Boston called you up and to get advice, and he started doing this, and then he finally remembered me. And he said, "That was you." And I said, "I'm here to thank you, man, because without that advice,
I wouldn't be here in this room.
here that movie wouldn't have happened. Nothing, none of this." And he literally, this was he was very child. He jumped up and down.
That's
And,
so great.
He said, "This is better than winning." And I said, "Hold on a second. This is not better than winning. This is good."
Wonderful speaking with you, and I'll be in touch. You know, and we'll figure out when we can get on with Owen. And then we had to get on in March for me, but we also had to talk about your book too every time.
Well, I'm not going to have any problems selling more copies of all 3 of our books. Let's do that.
Okay, sounds good.
The 6 books that Owen wrote while we were having this interview.
I know. Anyway, all right. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I love you so much.
Same here.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.
See ya.